All right.
Okay, wait. Before we start, can you hear my
Yeah.
kid in the background?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, well, this will be that episode we squeezed in despite everything.
I mean, this is the episode that we're talking about trying to do stuff with babies anyway, right? So,
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
all right. Morning, Matt.
Hello, sir. How you doing, Stephanie?
Stephanie. Oh man, I haven't heard that since junior high.
Steven? Oh, really?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
by mistake or?
Well, yeah. No, most adults don't pick on a name anymore.
Oh, I have little nicknames for everybody. You'd be surprised
Oh,
that don't
okay.
that don't have any like intended meaning or anything.
Right. So, how's it
Cool.
going? How's the week?
Busy. Life. I don't know. I squeezed in some game time. That's always nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What ones?
Ones? Are you kidding? Still playing Metroid Fusion.
Oh yeah.
I know you implied you weren't a huge fan. I actually like it so far. I mean, I think it's interesting because it bills itself as Metroid 4 when really it's clearly not like it doesn't aim to be the same like big entry in the series as the previous three. But I don't mind that. I mean, it's got a kind of some silly little gimmicks, but it's kind of interesting. I don't know. It's a Metroid game. Whatever. I haven't played many Metroidvanias or platformers at all lately, so it's nice to
Yeah.
just have something easy to just jump into again.
Yeah. There's another one that I keep meaning to try called Axiom Verge.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah,
apparently really good, but yeah, I mean, Fusion was okay. I just didn't feel that it was as good as Super Metroid or even Metroid 2. I didn't quite feel the sense of gravity that was in it.
right,
And the thing that really made me annoyed was just the fact that there's this story element that it keeps interrupting the gameplay with.
right. I thought that might be it. I did take note of that since it is a big departure from the way the previous games were doing things, but I don't know. I mean, I also liked 2 and Super a lot more, but the story's interesting to me. It's just a different spin on things. I can dig it. Um, it's I don't know. It's the whole like collecting the energy from all the enemies thing is I don't know. It's just like Zelda. If you play enough Zelda games, they start to get really gimmicky. Like I just played Phantom Hourglass, and like all the mechanics are weird, and the Phantom Hourglass itself was weird. And I always tend to like the predecessors before they get all gimmicky, but at the same time, the gimmick doesn't necessarily destroy it for me. So, I don't know. I'll withhold judgment until I'm a little farther. I'm only about 2.5 hours in, but so far, yeah, it's good. Grab
Yeah,
and play game.
yeah.
How about you?
Well, it was a busy week for me. I went away on a 3-day business trip to Edmonton, which also meant that I didn't have a baby around. So, considering Edmonton is not a very pedestrian friendly city, I couldn't really easily get out and explore without having rented a car from the airport.
Okay.
I opted instead to spend my evenings playing video games.
Very nice. Very nice.
Well, at first I decided to just be lazy and watch TV because I haven't done that in almost a decade or so.
10 years, yeah.
And reaffirmed my belief that I hate cable television. Uh, dealing with advertisements and stuff is just stupid in my opinion. It's like
It's funny because you pay for the cable subscription
Yeah.
and you still get ads.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
it's like you just
yeah.
start getting into the groove of the show and then they interrupt it and it's like okay,
Oh, it's brutal.
I
Yeah.
guess I'll change the channel. Oh, I guess this is just the exact same, so I guess I'll turn it off and just go to sleep.
Yeah, I have not had cable since I left my parents' house.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah, same. But no, so I did get some time to play through from start to finish To the Moon,
Okay, awesome.
which
Thoughts?
well, I enjoyed it.
Okay.
It just begs the question of whether or not it's a game,
Okay.
because it's to me a video game, and it's a tired argument of like whether certain things are games or not. And to me, it's like if you don't have conditions for winning and losing, you can't call it a game. It then just becomes a toy. Uh,
Fair.
So that's what the game was. You can't lose the game. It's like a 3 hour narrative story. So it's like an interactive book or something. So there's not that there's anything wrong with that. But yeah, it's hard to like rate it as you would a typical game.
I see.
But it was
I
enjoyable.
see. Cool. Cool.
The music in particular was really well done, and it was a story that I didn't completely see the hook until about 3/4 of the way through, and it was enjoyable and non-traditional. And considering it was like made in RPG Maker,
I'm reading that now. Yep.
yeah,
Composer Laura Shigihara. Kind of an internet name that bounces around.
yeah, it was weird because like there was a few people in the credits, but most of them had like an alias of some sort instead of an actual name. So
Okay.
I guess it was I can't speak what the budget was, but I'm guessing it was non-existent.
Well, RPG Maker.
Yeah,
I
RPG
I see
Maker,
two
and
names
then
listed total on the on
yeah,
the page here for the team.
yeah, and then the people that worked on it had an alias, so they clearly weren't counting on it being professionally important to them.
Cool. That's their fourth game. I don't know. It sounds like they're serious about it to some degree.
Yeah,
Would you recommend it?
yeah, yeah. I mean, especially since it's just I beat it in just over 3 hours, and I think the average is around 5. So I don't know exactly how they squeeze 2 extra hours out of it, but yeah, it's worth checking out.
Cool. I'm curious what compelled you to add this to your list so high up, particularly.
So I don't even really remember why that ended up on my list. I think what it was is last year I started after I'd finished beating my last game of 2014 or 2015, whatever year it was. It's 16 now, right?
Something like that. Almost
Yeah.
done, I guess.
Okay. So yeah, at the end of 2015, I had a Reddit post where I listed a whole bunch of my Steam games, and I basically asked for advice on which games I should be playing next. And so I got a whole bunch of suggestions, and some of those ended up slipping off the list throughout the year as I came up with other ones that I wanted to play at the moment. But I think just because this was such a short experience, it managed to not get cut.
I see. I got it. Yeah, something you can slip in a business trip. Something you
Yeah.
can, that's how we prioritize games now, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probability we can actually finish them.
Yeah, so I started and finished that, and then because it was kind of a travel week for me as well, I was also counting on reading The Hero with a Thousand Faces,
Oh, yeah.
and I got about a third of the way through that book and absolutely hated the way it was written, so I stopped reading it, and instead now I've started playing the Fire Emblem Birthright.
Awesome. Yeah, the book's on my list, as I think we talked about
Yeah.
at some point in the distant past or something.
Yeah.
I can't really comment. I'm aware of it. I don't know much beyond the
Yeah,
reputation
it's
that precedes it.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's got a strong reputation, and where I went to animation school, we were doing like character development and stuff. That was something that had been recommended to us. So it's been on my to read list for years, and I finally planned on starting it this year and got around to starting it, and just I don't get it.
Not your thing.
Yeah, not my thing. But anyway, Birthright on the other hand, absolutely loving that so far.
Sweet.
Well,
Awesome.
it does have a downside to it in that the difficulty I don't think was balanced particularly well.
Okay. Remind me. Can you give me a little background on the game? I mean, it's a
So
3DS
it's
game.
Yeah, 3DS. I think it came out last year,
Okay.
and it's part of the I guess Pokemon style of gameplay where they sell multiple versions of the game, and you've got to decide which you're going to get or if you're going to get both of them.
Okay.
So there's I think 3 different versions of the game, 2 physical versions which I got, and then there's a third one that kind of like completes the story once you've played both of them, and I think that's only available for download.
Okay.
So I'm playing through Birthright, which is kind of recommended to be the starting point because it's easier. Um, but I guess you could story-wise start on either of the two physical games, and it doesn't make a huge difference. But I feel like the difficulty, and I'm not the only person that's complained about how difficult it is, wasn't necessarily done as carefully as it could have been. Because I've played the previous games, well, some of the previous games before, so I started off on hard mode. There's like normal, hard, and insane.
Interesting for a
And
strategy
and
game.
so I got four battles in, and I was at a point where you've got like some NPCs up at the top left corner of the map, and you start off at the bottom right corner of the map, and you've got to like get to your NPCs before the enemy slaughters them.
Okay.
And it's just like I was just beelining it, and I could not get there in time before the enemy would just like critically hit the enemies, the allies NPC and kill them. And so it's just like, okay, well, if I can't physically get to them before they're dead, and this is the normal mode, not even, or sorry, this is
Wow.
hard mode, not even insane. It's like,
So they probably took like all the metrics of the normal game and just cranked them, even if that
yeah.
didn't even result in something possible. I guess that's kind of
Well, it's like they boosted up the critical hit and stuff, and it's like because like, you playing where it's, I was playing with permanent death or whatever, so when a character dies, you can't just restart from that turn. You have to restart the entire battle. So I restarted
right.
it 4 or 5 times, and it's just like enough of this. And I restarted the game on on the normal difficulty, and it's
Brutal, man.
disappointing because I got to the same part of the game in like 20 minutes because it was just like super easy in comparison. So
Hmm.
it's annoying because I've got the option now. I either play it on easy difficulty and I can enjoy the story, but not really get much of a challenge out of it, or I can
Right.
play hard mode and just be like completely frustrated with the challenge. And so,
Gotcha. I've never been a huge fan of like difficulty levels for this kind of game. I mean, I don't know. It's okay in like Mega Man 2 and stuff, but
yeah,
I don't know. A strategy game, I like it when it's a well crafted progression. You
yeah,
have your earlier levels that kind of teach and so forth, and then as the game goes on, it eventually gets difficult versus like having to make that choice right away. Because in all honesty, I'm probably not going to play a strategy game more than once.
yeah,
Certainly not unless it's years apart. So
yeah,
I mean, why be faced with a difficulty, like having to choose what difficulty I want right from the start? I'd rather just one experience that goes from kind of a teaching to in a gradual, well
yeah,
crafted way, a very difficult experience later on.
yeah.
But that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense to an extent with a game like Civilizations or something where there's no story behind it, and so people are more inclined to play it again and again.
Yeah, Civilization. I mean, that's a high replay value game, whereas a crafted story type game like
Yeah,
Fire Emblem,
yeah, it's like
less
once you
so.
get through those stories and you kind of see like the plot twists and stuff, it's not as exciting the second time through. So, uh,
Indeed.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm. How far along have you, or rather, how far back do you go with Fire Emblem? Because I played the first game and that's it. So I'm totally. I don't even know what it
Uh,
looks like anymore.
I th- I can't remember if they re-released the first one. Um, but
Mm,
so I started with
possibly.
the Game Boy Advance. So it was like Shadow Dragon or something
Right.
generic titled. Um,
Do you remember
so
in like? Do you remember in like 1998 when like Nintendo had their series and Atlas had their series and whoever else had their series? It was
yeah,
very easy to go and enumerate all the games in the series. Like there
yeah,
was 5 Final Fantasies, there was five
yeah.
Fire Emblems, there was 6 Mega Mans, and now it's just like
Now there's
if
like 30 Final Fantasies, and
and a million Fire Emblems, 10 billion Mega Mans, 20 million Street Fighters. It's okay. I
yeah,
mean, these series just go on forever, and that's
yeah,
cool. But it's if you're a completist, forget it, right?
yeah. I had to give up with Final Fantasy at some point. Like I
Final
think,
Fantasy's out of hand.
yeah. Like I played Mystic Quest, but
Yeah.
as far as like non-numerical ones, I think Mystic Quest Tactics and Tactics Advance are like the only non-numerical ones I played. Um, and
Uh,
then and then once they started making numerical ones be like MMOs,
that's
I
weird.
stopped playing those.
That's so
So
weird to me. Yeah, I mean, they don't even maintain this consistent. Well, there's no canon anyway, I guess, but like
yeah,
mainline series, it's crazy. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, so,
Wild.
yeah. So I played. I hated 8. I hated 10. Enjoyed. Was 11 the multiplayer online?
11 was, and I think 14 was, and
Okay,
I
so
don't know.
so I skipped 11. I enjoyed 12, but 13 had such abysmal reviews, and by that point I had amassed a massive uh, backlog, so I just never bothered to buy that one.
Got it, got it. Yeah, I was quite a devout Final Fantasy player until 8.
Mm.
And then I had such a hard time with 8, had such a hard time getting through it. I just
Yeah.
never played any more. And I did go back to 8 and finish it like way, way later.
You
But I,
tried 9 at one point, didn't you?
I've played 9, I've played 10, I played 11. I probably played 12. 12's the one you kind of, your characters just run around on their own, right? And you're like in the desert. The guy has
Yeah,
blonde hair.
you're like blonde Aladdin.
Yeah, of course, right? I played up till 12, I'll say. But we're talking like maybe 1 hour of each. 8 is the last one. Actually, no, 9 is the last one I really poured any time into. 9, everyone told me like, I know you hated 8, but 9 is like, it's like the old series again. It has the same guys, blah blah blah. But I just couldn't get into it. I don't know. It just didn't really work for me. But I'd be willing to give it another chance.
I enjoyed a lot of elements of 9. Um, I think they did pay a lot of tribute to the old games, but I didn't necessarily enjoy the character design, and I didn't necessarily feel the story was happening at a quick enough pace.
Interesting. I think
Uh,
for me, I wasn't really looking for tribute to the old games. I mean, it can do its own thing, that's fine. But what I
yeah,
miss about the old games a lot, and I feel I don't have a lot of allies here. People don't seem to feel the same way. But I liked the ability to craft your characters more so. It was very present in the old games, like especially in 1, 3, and 5, where you could switch classes. You could
yeah,
you'd have someone be a class for a while, and they'd build whatever abilities, and you switch them
yeah,
into something else. And I thought it was really interesting as the game went on to craft your party in the direction you wanted to take it, and then that would affect your strategy moving forward. And I can look at those games and say, oh, that was done really interesting in an interesting way, but maybe if they tweaked it, they could do it this way, and it'd be an even cooler game. And
yeah.
yet, the series never really explored that. It went cinematic with 7, and then they never looked back, right?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that aspect of tactics. For me, 5 was really spoiled because I was playing that on the PlayStation and it was incredibly buggy. So that was crashing for me or like freezing all the time. So I absolutely hated playing 5, and I don't know how much of that is just because the game mechanics and how much of it was the freezing. But for me, 4 and 6 were always the favorite for me, and they had really strong narratives. But there was definitely a lot of customization in 6 with letting your characters do whatever.
Yeah, interesting. I recognize the strength of the narrative of 4 and 6. There are certainly more crafted experiences than say 3 or 5. But
Yeah,
for me, I always liked 3 until 6. Those 4 games, and 7. I liked 7. It didn't hit the high notes for me. But 3 and 5, I recognize the stories are abysmal compared to 4 and 6.
yeah,
But I like the two games in that they're similar if you play both, and
yeah,
they're both very almost strategic.
yeah,
And since such a huge portion of those games is really just grinding and fighting and stuff,
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I think the games come out better when they focus on making that portion of the experience interesting for the player.
Hmm.
It's too bad they never came up with a game that did both perfectly. Like, I mean, imagine the narrative
Well, I
of
mean,
4 with
for me,
a
that's
well-done strategy
tactics.
element. Yeah, Tactics was a very different. I mean, I love Tactics,
Yeah,
but
it's a different
I
style of
suppose,
game. But for
yeah,
me, where they had like the good job class utilization and a good story, uh, that
yeah,
game did it for me.
yeah. I agree. I don't think it exemplified the genre, right?
Right,
I mean, you
different
didn't
genre.
have, yeah. I guess everyone calls them JRPGs now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I guess along those notes, into what we were hoping to talk about today, these games are obviously way beyond what our kids can play and will be playing anytime in the near future, I imagine.
And personally, it's beyond my ability to contribute time into a game now that
Yeah.
I'm a parent.
But so I'm curious. I remember reading an article on Kotaku a long time ago about one of the writers saying, like, when is the best time to get their kids playing video games? And I guess it's kind of a contentious issue. Like, there's a lot of people that feel that kids shouldn't be playing games. And I don't know, like, the Penny Arcade, their philosophy was basically like computers are useful and a huge part of our lives. Why would you limit your kids' exposure to that?
Right.
And this writer on Kotaku was basically saying, like, as soon as their kid could read is when it's time to play games. So what's your thoughts on the matter? Have you introduced any sort of gaming to your offspring yet?
So, really interesting question. It's also interesting timing. There was just an article, I forget where it was, but talking about this consortium of doctors getting together and coming up with a solid kind of objective, based on research, conclusion about how much digital media you should expose your child to until such and such an age, which I read and don't really remember, actually. I remember it was an hour a day. I just don't remember how long that was supposed to be, like until they're 3 or until they're 5 or something.
Right.
Regardless, personally, what I always do is I think back to my own childhood and I think of the restrictions my parents placed on me and whether they were helpful or not. And also, I mean, as a young person, we probably all did this, but I did everything I could to circumvent this, right? My parents go out to the store and immediately hop on the games and they don't know, right? Or like my parents, believe it or not, let me have a television in my room, which I had right by my bed growing up. So literally, like, as soon as it was bedtime, I'd just go and start playing video games until like 4 a.m. every single day. And I had all these tactics to like hide it. Obviously, I'm listening to it at the lowest volume, and I knew that the light
put a shirt against the door.
Through the crack of my door. So I put a towel up against the door. And then I remember my parents, one time my mom, she must have heard me, so she came in and was like complaining that I was playing games at night. So I had to improvise in the towel because she would open the door and see the towel there. So I'd like put a sheet farther back so that I had time to jump up and grab it. It was ridiculous. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that, I mean, I just poured tons of time into this, and I think ultimately it was a great motivator for me growing up to get into technical things, to get into more kind of artistic things and take the direction I've taken in life, which I don't think...
And even learning a second language for you, right?
Exactly. Like it's influenced me in so many positive ways, and I really can't think of any negative ways. I understand there are people who are affected negatively, who spend their whole life just sitting there in front of the TV playing Grand Theft Auto for their 1,000th hour or whatever, right? But I think all else being correct in that person's life, I think I trust the individual to moderate their own game time appropriately. I say that with caveats, obviously, right? I mean, as a parent, if I see my own child maybe on the right track and then kind of skewing into too many games, which is affecting them in so and so a way, I think at that point I could step in and have the conversation. But I've always been very critical of attempts to put a hard scientific cap on game time or even not just video games, but say film. Like, I mean, I grew up loving film. I could sit down in front of the television and watch like 5 movies in a day. And to some people that's like, oh, he's just watching TV all day. For me, I mean, I was absorbing these stories and like learning about filmmaking. It was a very different thing than, clicking through, I don't know, whatever, Cupcake Wars for 10 hours, right? So, I mean, I know it's a fine line, but I'm quite in favor of I guess unlimited exposure. Yeah. At this point, at least, I mean, my daughter is a year and a half old. It's very early to make that judgment, I guess. But to bounce all the way back and answer your original question about what I'm doing, so she certainly takes interest in anything digital. She loves iPads. I turn on the TV and play some games. She's totally like turns into a zombie on the spot and stares. So I don't. Like, if it's my turn to take care of her, I don't just turn on video games and play. But there's been times where I decide, I haven't played a video game in quite a while. I'm just going to sneak away for a bit and play whatever, Super Nintendo for half an hour. And she's around and running around, and she'll kind of come in the room and see. And I'm like, cool, I kind of try and get her involved. I give her a controller, and maybe if it's serious game time for me, I'll leave it at that. But if I'm just kind of screwing around, maybe I'll give her the Player One controller and kind of show her, like, when you press the button, look, Mario jumps or whatever. I've done that a few times. And it's hard to say if she really gets it, but she's definitely kind of seeing that when she presses buttons on the controller, she's able to manipulate what's on the screen. Yeah. So I'm very slowly easing her in and trying to really at this point gauge interest. Like, it seems to be there. I mean, with an iPad, I'm sure you've seen this in your own child, but like you hand them an iPad or a phone or something and they just go crazy pressing the buttons. I mean, they get it. They see that what they're doing is causing changes on the screen. So she could see that with these video games, which for me tend to be older systems, right? Super Nintendo and whatever, where it's very obvious, right? You press the button and Mario jumps, right? Yeah. Whereas, I don't know, like I was playing Geometry Wars. Is that not Geometry Wars? What's the other one? Super Stardust. In her presence at one point, and I handed her a controller. And I don't know, there's just so much going on the screen. Yeah. It's not so obvious what the result of your button pressing really is. Like
if you don't know to be looking at like the center of the screen or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean it's a dual stick shooter, so like there's already, it's not quite bullet hell, but there's stuff everywhere flying all over the place. Like she pushes the right stick, and I don't even know if she's registering that that's making this little ship shoot. So I think depending on the game, there's certain games that better make that connection, and I tend to put those games in front of her a bit. So that's about as much as I've done so far. I haven't really given her much in terms of exposure to like cell phone games. It's an interesting idea, but maybe it's just because it's not something I myself am super duper interested in. It's not a place I've gone yet.
Yeah, it seems like it's totally a weird issue with modern games like that. Or I actually haven't tried putting a console controller in my kid's hand yet, but we did eventually let him start discovering stuff on our iPad, or not an iPad, but I've got a Galaxy Note 10.1 or.
That's not the one that explodes, right?
Oh, that's
a Note 7.
That's the one I got for free on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we started off, we used that as just like a white noise machine, and eventually, like, he sees us turning this on and turning it off, and he wants to interact with it too, so we would let him, and then we figured if he's going to be using this, we should actually get some sort of a kid's app for it. So we started off almost a year ago, probably, letting him use, I think the first one I got was something just called, like, Ethereal Instrument or something.
So like a music game?
Yeah, so it's called Ethereal Dialpad, and it's basically you can touch the screen and it'll make music, and then as you draw your finger around on the screen, the notes change, and
cool.
it leaves like a line on it behind you. So it was like, there's no rules for this. It's like a toy that you can just interact with. And so he enjoyed doing that because it's like you move your finger and it reacts. So he enjoyed that. And then over time, we started introducing other stuff to him. It's funny because I had Super Hexagon on my phone. And so
can he beat anything? Any levels?
He can't beat anything, but he can last about 5 seconds longer than Andrea can.
Awesome. But does he legitimately like get what's going on?
He's just like he's just touching it, and he knows that there were rules to it because it would constantly be like playing and then ending in the voice says game over or whatever. And then so he would start handing it to me and watching me do it because he understood that I can play it longer than him.
Awesome. Yeah. I've seen some of that. I've seen some of that with like Mario World and stuff too, where like my daughter will just hand the controller to me, and we taught her like baby sign language. I don't know if you've done anything like that, but
not intentionally.
Like, yeah. Okay. Well, she pounds 2 fists together to mean like more. Please give me more. Yeah. So she'll hand the controller to me and then do that, and that's like excites me so much. I'm like, yes. She's like, she wants me to play this game.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing, right? I think. I mean, she recognizes that her own actions are not progressing, whereas when I do it, something different is happening, and she's observing that process. So.
Yeah. So I mean, it started off with stuff that was super simple like that, and then we eventually got a program called Baby Blocks, And it's
Okay.
just like there's like three little holes will get generated, and then it places down something like a fire truck or a suitcase or something, and you just have to drag it to the hole, and
Okay.
then it'll make a sound and glow a little bit when you get it right. And once you get all three of them, then you get a little celebration screen with like balloons that you can touch to pop. And so at first he was like really, had never seen anything like that in his whole life, and was picking it up kind of slow. But he's like today, he just blazes through that. Like he just immediately can find something and make it through. So he's happy with that. And then we've kind of graduated onto another one that's got like the alphabet. And when you touch the stuff, it makes sounds. So that one's called Endless Alphabet,
Cool.
or Endless ABC rather. And yeah, it was like kind of the same way. Like it was slightly different mechanics to it. So when he started off, even though he knew the baby blocks, he wasn't exactly a pro at this one. But eventually, like you touch like the T, and it's just like tu, 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 tu. And then so you drag that up to the letter T, and let go, and it pops into place. And when you complete the word, then the voice says the word, and these little monsters come and like act out a little skit based on the word. And so he loves that. And
Awesome.
yeah, there's a couple of different small apps like that that we've just let him have, and he'll play that for like 15 minutes straight, which is pretty good for his attention span.
Have you found it's actually like, has he learned the letters through these games? Has he actually learned
He's
things and applied them outside of the game?
I'll be honest. Like, there's recommendations that you don't let kids watch TV and stuff, and we've got a couple of different YouTube channels with baby songs that we let him listen to, and I've been surprised at how he starts picking up stuff. Like he sings along with some of the songs. Like he doesn't necessarily know the words, but he does know the rhythm.
Right.
So he sings "Baa Baa Black Sheep" and "Rain Rain Go Away," and if it's happy
Awesome.
and you know it, he claps or stomps his feet or shouts "Hooray!" And he is at the point now where he's able to get a good number of letters and shapes and numbers. And to be frank, he's picking that up more from the YouTube and from these apps than he is from me. Like I am reading, but I'm not necessarily like sitting there with a chart telling him the numbers and letters and shapes.
Got it. Just to set some context here, how old is your child?
He will be 2 in another month and like a week or something.
Wow, the big 2.0. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so every kid ages differently too. Like some kids are super into learning to talk early, and he's always been more interested in learning physical stuff. So he's like quite strong and like climbs on stuff, and he's into like playing with anything that's like mechanical, like that has buttons or switches and stuff on it. But so he's now saying a lot of words, and he's always been able to communicate what he wants just by pointing and saying
Yeah.
this or that or whatever. But so it's pleasing now seeing that he is starting to like really connect a lot of words together all of a sudden.
Very cool. Very cool. And back on topic,
Yeah.
do you credit some or any of that to the learning games you've
Yeah,
exposed him to?
I legitimately do. Like head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Like he's picked up like a lot of body parts and stuff like that. And I do have to credit for that, because like if I'm reading, I'll like point out like what animals are and what they're doing and stuff. But I don't tend to focus as much on like body parts and the alphabet itself.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah, we haven't gone that route at all. I just never thought of it, to be honest, like learning games. I mean, we also do the YouTube video thing, and then we read to her a lot. And so she's picked up a lot of words just from books,
Yeah.
which is great, of course. But games, I don't know. My thoughts were I would, I'm not sure actually what I want to do. If I want to like kind of start her at the kind of the dawn of gaming, or at least
Yeah.
have have her experience reflect my own, like here's the original stuff I grew up with and so on. Or if I want her to kind of be more in touch with what's happening now, or if I want to do both at the same time, like here's kind of what's out now and this is what your eventual friends will be playing. And
it's hard to know with that because it's like
what I grew up with.
Yeah, I've got like the same thought process. Like I'm kind of interested in like exploring what was the history of film or what was the history of music or the history of games and stuff. But it's like I don't know how in favor I am of that. I feel like for music it makes the most sense because you can really see a clear progression in a quick period of time of like how the blues developed into rock and metal and stuff.
And you don't see that in film and games?
You do, but I feel like early games and early film weren't as engaging.
Really?
At least in my opinion. Like, I don't know, like if I want to start playing with like a lot of the Atari games and stuff like that, I didn't get introduced to that until after I was introduced to other stuff, and I have a really hard time going back to that. And like early black and white films and stuff, like a lot of that I feel is just not as enjoyable as stuff from like my childhood, and maybe it's just because it was my childhood.
But I think that's very possibly a big part of it.
Yeah.
But because, I mean, for myself, my experience is very different. Although games, yeah, I know. I always felt, and this is me having grown up in the 80s and early 90s, I mean, I always felt that the original Nintendo was the first system with like great replay value.
And that's when the gaming industry kind of exploded, right? Is like
it is. And I can't honestly tell how much of that is nostalgia. Like, I'm sure there's people that just pine for the Atari days, right? Which I don't at all. And I can go back and play an Atari game and kind of have fun with it. But yeah, it's a very different experience than many, especially newer games that I very much love. But I think whether one wants to claim that the experience is as valuable as that of a modern game, going back to, say, at least the original Nintendo era and Super Nintendo era, I think there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like the roots of what you see in modern games were built in that era, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the franchises a lot of those franchises have kind of gone on the wayside, but still a lot of franchises that continue to have relevance now, really that's when they were built, right?
Yeah.
Not so much in the Atari days. So, and film, I mean, maybe it's a digression of the topic, but film, I mean, I personally grew up loving like 40s noirs and 30s monster movies and foreign films of the 60s and 70s,
I never really did get into that even after like getting an education in film. So.
Yeah, there you go. But I mean, I think watching that era of film, I mean, I would never argue that it's better because I mean, it was a more limited medium, right? Like you can do all of that now, and more. So I mean, you can't argue that as like a industry, it was superior technically. But I think with the constraints they had, there's just a different style of filmmaking that was necessitated by that. And then, I mean, it's really just a matter of whether you like that or not, right? So you don't, I do. Yeah. That's fine. But I do think there's value in maybe going back and looking and seeing kind of the influences that were built in that era that continue today. Yeah. And I would apply that to games, and I would apply that to my own child. At the same time, I guess the point I wanted to get at, the approach I take or intend to take, I guess, with my daughter, with everything, is to kind of gauge interest and move in the right direction. I don't want to push her. Which is what I was just going to say, is like that kind of goes back to your comment earlier about playing video games at all. Like, I don't feel there necessarily should be a limitation, and I don't know that I necessarily want to push in a specific direction. Exactly.
Like there was another person that had been, I don't know, interviewed or something on Kotaku at one point about how they are forcing their kid to start at the beginning of gaming history and work their way forward. And it's like, I can certainly appreciate that and understand how it could be beneficial, but I also don't feel like recreation needs to be forced. And it's
I don't know if they use the word forced, but that's...
Right, but it's like if he's not allowed to play Katamari Damacy until he plays like Final Fantasy 1. It's like I feel like I'm gonna be trying to be just open and like if he sees something and he likes it, I can have suggestions and try to encourage him to try other stuff. But I don't know that I necessarily want to force him to be like, okay, it's Atari year, let's play Atari games.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I want to show and potentially guide, but I mean, if my daughter has different ideas, then I'll readjust, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, I can say, like, here's what I grew up with. Here's what's out now. Do you want to maybe play these older games with me? I'll show you kind of the history of gaming, and we can go through some of the classics and try that. And if she says yes and gets bored, well, we'll readjust. If she says, no, I'm not interested, then I might still say, well, this is what I like. So, you know, this
you're
is
sitting
Daddy's
over there, and this is my day.
Toy. Yeah, you play that, I'll play this. Yeah, you know, I mean, I guess I agree. I don't like the idea of forcing anything on anyone. And I think, I mean, when you think of it, like, I don't know about you, you know, I'm this kind of big 80s nerd, and a lot of that is nostalgia. But the reason I'm an 80s nerd is because when I grew up, I was absorbing 80s pop culture.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't have my parents saying, look at this awesome stuff from the 60s.
Yeah.
And I'm better off for that, right? I mean, the 80s were arguably this ridiculous, you know, over the top time, but I think it was the perfect time to have a childhood, right? When none of that mattered, and you could absorb the ridiculous whatever cartoons and video games. And it's very different than now, and I don't know how much of this applies, but I don't want to do that to my daughter, right? Like, I know people who have kids and all they watch is 80s cartoons and all they play is old Nintendo games. And part of me is like, yeah, you know, that's awesome. The other part of me is really strongly thinking, like, when your kid starts school and all the other kids are like, I've never heard of anything you're talking about.
What is the Super Mario Brothers Super Show?
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think also it's not just a matter of like putting your kid out of touch with reality, but he's missing something. He or she is missing something, right? Like there's great in each era, and by failing to let your kid explore what is there in the present is kind of unfortunate. Yeah. So I would augment my child's experience with what I grew up with, but I wouldn't do any forcing.
Yeah. If they happen to be playing some castle, well, I guess Konami doesn't make games anymore, but if they start playing the newest Metroid or whatever, it'll be nice to be like, oh, let's go back to Super Metroid and see what this 2D format is like. And maybe they'll just be like, man, how do you play these non-VR games?
Back to the Future too. Right?
Yeah.
I forget the exact line. Yeah. You use your hands. Yeah. No, exactly. I think, well, it's weird for me though, because I mean, growing up, as you know, even now, I'm always into the past, into stuff that's old. So even when I was in grade 1 and 2, like I inherited an Atari ST from my grandfather. Which was already like, you know, garbage, old computer, whatever. And I just love the thing. You go in and like hack stuff and like everything was so, I don't know, in your hands kind of. Like I could look at a game and understand everything about it because the scope of the game, it was small enough that I could do that. Yeah. So something about older, obscure things always appealed to me. So I think I'll have to work to not push that idea onto my daughter. But yeah.
All right. Well, looking at the 5 different recordings we've got going here, it looks like we've done close to 40 minutes or so, which is well above our half-hour time that we attempt for and never reach.
And speaking of having no time to play games as adults, I barely have time to do a podcast, so I'm coming up quick on my allotted freedom box of time. That was part of the downside to me. Well, I guess I shouldn't say downside, but that was part of the deal of a trade of me going on this business trip this week. Is I'm supposed to be looking after the kid all weekend, so I should start doing that. Indeed. All right.
Well, it's interesting to hear. I'm gonna have to start getting a controller into Laz's hands at some point, and you should check out some apps for yours.
I took some notes as we talked.
Yeah.
So I'll let you know how it goes.
We'll reconvene.
You should do a follow-up. Yeah.
All right. Well, there may have been some technical issues that forced us to like pause and record about 8 different times, but all in all, I thought it was a good conversation. So, thanks everyone for listening to the Vagabond Gamecast, and see you next time.
All right, man. Till next time.